afternoon. This is Shirley with Spirit of Matter, and I do have a chance to do a live. So this is a Saturn day and Sol hour with the Sun conjuncting Aries in Aries. Ascendant is ruled by Venus, 9-degree Libra, with Venus in Aries, on the descendant, and the midheaven ruled by the moon, with the moon in Gemini, 28 degrees, and the moon is exactly squaring Neptune. So great time for energy and emotional channeling, but not so much for accurate physical communication. Okay, but Mercury is retrograde, and still we have a new moon coming up. This is the full moon in, did I wrote full moon? Yes, in Scorpio. And I'm going to transition to my other page where I take a look at the full moon in Scorpio. It's going to be called the Pink Moon, like the Nick Drake album. And we're going to be having a moon in Scorpio, 4 degrees, and the Sun, of course, in Taurus, while Jupiter and Uranus conjuncting with Jupiter already on the 22nd degree. So let's begin. The ruler of the moon is going to be Mars, and it's going to be on my ascendant, which is 24 degrees Pisces. Yes. And the ruler of the Sun is going to be Venus, still in Aries. So Venus is kind of like fallen in Aries, 23 degrees Aries, conjuncting Chiron, a 20-degree Aries. There's going to be a bit of a T-square with Pluto. Pluto is in 2 degrees Aquarius at this time. And so also Lilith in the background is going to be in 22 degrees Virgo. So yeah, before I begin to kind of gather what I think about this, the Sol in 4 degrees Taurus, which is right on my Venus, is the solution for this T-square. T-square is usually solved at the other pole of the T. So if Pluto is the pole, okay, it squares moon and it squares the Sun, the opposition to Pluto would be 2 degrees Leo to 4 degrees Leo, and is ruled by the Sun, but the Sun is already involved in the T-square. This gives extra emphasis on the Sun and the ruler of the Sun, which is Venus. But lo and behold, the ruler of the Sun is Venus, which is ruled by Mars, which is the ruler of the moon. So what we get here is a kind of a Mobius loop, okay, where you try to flip it and reverse it, but it kind of doesn't have a beginning and doesn't have an end. And this is on a full moon. So what are we going to be revealing is, full moon is the revelation time. What's going to be revealed is how one thing is interlinked with another in kind of this Mobius loop, where the structure in particular is going to be exposed. That one thing is interlinked in such a way where there's no beginning and there's no end. Now, what are those things that are so interlinked? Let's look at the entire fixed axis. So Scorpio, moon in Scorpio, moon is fallen in Scorpio. This is where, moon is where we feel safe, is what we need to feel safe. Scorpio is where we fight for our life sometimes and go through the existential crisis. So you understand the moon is not exactly happy there, is even unhappy, very unhappy in Scorpio. And this is where the places where we want to feel safe, or that we look for safe. You want to look at Scorpio in your chart, providing us with a crisis. This is the Scorpio. pole of this. The soul in Taurus, ruled by a Venus that is ruled by Mars, which is the ruler of the moon. It tells us that there is a lot of crisis to do with identity, perhaps to do with women or women in the military, or just women asserting themselves, because Venus, the ruler of the sun, is in Aries. And the voice as well is Venus. So we could be hearing a lot about transgender surgeries as well. Even that interlinked with transgender surgeries. I will delineate that for you in a second. Informed consent is again going to be, informed consent for surgeries are going to be a big issue that might arise with Pluto. We're talking about that Pluto is in general a change from the core of something. There's a nuclear change. And the Pluto in Aquarius is usually nuclear change to like system or AI. But it can also be involved in the change of identity that is to do with gender, that is to do with surgery. So I'm predicting to have a lot of the discourse of transgender and gender affirming topics rise to the discourse, where we kind of see how one thing interlinks with another. So think about the transgender identity, the gender affirming procedures, feeling safe with masculinity, or feeling safe with kind of like the deep psychology crisis that Mars represents in Scorpio. Gender dysphoria perhaps can be the rise. So people are going to see how these topics are so interlinked. Okay, for example, one way in which they can be interlinked is kind of like, if we don't affirm a transgender identity, people will seek out gender affirming surgery and will suffer from gender dysphoria. Then if we provide them with gender affirming surgery, we don't approve of their gender, they will still suffer with dysphoria. But if we accept transgender identity, would they still need a gender affirming surgery? Maybe yes, maybe not. And some yes, some no. So it's kind of like all of these questions interlinking, but there's going to be information, there's going to be something revealed, very likely information as well, with the vicinity here of, Chiron retrograde, close to Rahu that is ruled by Mars, Mars in Pisces, ruled by Jupiter on the 22nd degree of Taurus. We're going to talk about lethality associated maybe with fertility, and maybe with women or transgender women or something like this. So if we talk about this topic, Jupiter on the 22nd, Lilith on the 22nd, this is where we might be even exposed to the many times that gender affirming, but also not accepting gender identity, and also gender dysphoria led to letalities. But here 22nd is not suicide, although it's connected with Uranus. It can perhaps be assisted suicide. This is another topic that I'm predicting that's going to be on the rise. Jupiter-Uranus is in general technology. Jupiter is very religious, very philosophical, but also very optimistic and very expansive. With the 22nd degree, the topic of death with dignity arises, but it can also be genuine murder of people because of the religion. And unfortunately, Jupiter also signifies children. So when it comes to medical welfare, perhaps we will be discussing how certain medical procedures and certain psychological experiences lead to murder. I know that this was something that arose with Mercury being on the 22nd, conjuncting the Sun retrograde in Mercury retrograde, yes, in Aries, where we had the postpartum depression murder-suicide case. Here perhaps we will be discussing such topics on a larger scope with a lot more intricacy. Uranus, when you have a Uranus transit with Uranus involved, with rulers and rulers of rulers, basically it gives you this angle and then that angle and then that angle and then that angle. So you will be going through a lot of transformations, but not transformations like Pluto or kind of like letdowns and stuff like that, like Neptune, but more like shocking discoveries. It's like, hey, that can happen, that can happen. You look another angle at the topic, another angle at the topic, and Uranus just has this city walk. And this unfortunately can signify a bit of a Rashomon effect to do with this. However, this Rashomon is kind of like there is a Rashomon that is revealing itself. So what is revealing itself is not like, if you think about like a murder case, like, oh, this is the murderer, that's why they did it. It's more like, look at the intricacy of the entire Rashomon. This is what is revealed. Okay, the many testimonies, the many points of view, the many aspects, the many topics interrelating with each other. Here, and an issue of transformation and science and medicine and intervention, but also military. This is why I suspect the military, medical warfare is going to be a topic that is going to be perhaps more exposed or more discussed at around this time. Now, to the complexity, well, this is, okay, Moon is ruled by Mars, Sun is ruled by Venus, that is ruled by Mars. Mars is in Pisces, Pisces is ruled by Jupiter. Jupiter is with Uranus in Venus sign, that is ruled by Mars, because Venus is in Aries, that is ruled by Mars. Okay, it's kind of like all roads lead back to Mars, and Mars in Pisces is an action that is kind of like you have to surrender your course of action. Okay, Mars in Pisces do best when they merge with what they desire, and they do very well in that. But Mars in Pisces is kind of like the Wu way, but also kind of like no effort. Okay, you merge with the goal, but also it has a current of its own. Okay, if you think about Mars as exalted in Capricorn, when you have your strategy for long-term endurance, athletics, how you're going to reach the goal, climb to the top with difficult conditions, and you persevere. Okay, Pisces is kind of like throw that energy and put it in the sea. Okay, shoot an arrow in the ocean. It's very bizarre. And so what we can see is how, for example, criminal activity connected with medical activity, connected with the psychological and psychic activity. So you think about, for example, MDMA as a psychedelic that you can use to heal from trauma, even abuse and stuff like that, but also psychedelics as drugs that diminishes boundaries, and so people are more inclined to merge with each other, also sexually, if you listen to Terence McKenna. And it's enough that you conjoin people in a similar room that are not supposed to do this, and then you already created a confusing situation into the mix. So these revelations are going to be interlinked. The way Mars dissolves in Pisces. So if you think about Mars as justice and the act of severing ties with the unjust, okay? So this is where a person might be going looking for justice, but may find that they're very confused. And, it's kind of like where the doctor and the drug dealer are very much interlinked. And so in some cases, it's kind of like the criminal provider can do more good than harm, and sometimes, but also more harm than good. And then the actual supposedly legal, the documented provider is doing more harm than good because they're practicing basically medical welfare. So this is where a lot of complexity. If you think about this as drugs that we use for psychological crises, times, or drugs that we administer for certain physical issues. This can be gender affirming as well. So maybe the type of hormones that are administered, maybe the conjoining of or blending of basically medical welfare and medicine, and the intricacy around discerning, which is very relevant. Now, Mars is in a Mars phase of Pisces, and I wanted to talk about Neptune in this phase. I will dedicate another video to that. But just because we have this full moon with Mars and Neptune on this phase of Pisces, that is already Mars ruled, this is malefic, is reducing, and this is where we get a little bit of not a little bit, but shortages of drugs, shortages of even the drugs that are provided to soldiers are expected around this time. We get cutting out drugs and cutting out alcohol, cutting out addictions can be at this time, especially with Saturn co-present, and Saturn is ruling Pluto. So people will be cutting off drugs. We get things that began long time ago. Also drug cartels, okay? This year, if you heard about the Marengo trials, so February 2024, the Marengo trials in the Netherlands ended with arresting kind of like a couple of big drug lords that assassinated certain people, but maybe from jail continued to threaten lives of politicians and so on and so forth. Maybe not, I don't know. But also basically the cutting out of drug cartels is also happening with Neptune at this ending phase of Pisces. So we are basically getting a serious reality check, both to, hey, you thought that this is something that is illegal, but you could actually have a healing experience from that, and you thought that this company that sells you a vaccine, okay, is vaccine, actually is not, and is even lethal material, or is the AP thing that's been going on for decades, but now people are now beginning to understand on a larger scale what's been going on, and on the at the same time, those drug cartels kind of begin to fall. I know there's also a sentence in Italy that is being completed, and so things that took decades to bring into fruition, okay, tending to certain mafias in Italy, tending to the Marengo trials in Netherlands, stuff that we didn't think was even possible, now are happening. At the same time, big reality checks on what we thought was medicine. At the same time, shortages. And yes, Neptune can also unfortunately be stuff like pain relief or anti-anxiety, as we had with the Clonex. So this full moon is bringing a full exposure of the intricacy around these topics. More Mars Neptune. Yes, can be some sexual scandals as well. For example, I'll give you an example. There's Tim Ballard, I think, who was known for arresting a drug trafficking and child trafficking. And he was like, there was a movie, and he interviewed. He was interviewed to a podcast, and like, how do you arrest these people and so on. And then suddenly cases upon cases upon cases of litigation towards him for sexual harassment began to pop up. And so the intricacy around those things, and so kind of like the questioning, it's not about the questioning of the character, although it can be with the sun here, but is more about the intricacy around those who are supposedly bringing to justice. The movies around justice is also movies, Pisces and Mars justice, but also war movies as well. Ideation and devaluation themes are also involved whenever Neptune is involved in Saturn, and Mars is applying to conjunct with Neptune. This is a closing synodic cycle, applying to be closing synodic cycle of Mars and Neptune. So all the themes that came up in the last 2.5 years regarding bringing into justice drug cartels, psychiatric with psychedelic drugs, but also drugs in general, the medical field. I told you I have a dentist friend who had a knee, like tore some ligament in the knee, and we told him that there are things that he can do to recover, but he was afraid because the doctor told him, you either do this surgery and then you can play the sport you like, or you can recover, but you will not be able to return to play the sport you like. Of course, he went and did that surgery, and now he's going to a second surgery, okay, in hope that is going to recover. And we get to see that this type of surgeries that is horrid, where surgeries, you pay for the surgery and you don't get the medicine, then you need another surgery. And this is already so invasive on the body and so corrupt on every level. The use of medical welfare and experiments of all these things are beginning to paramount. All these topics from the last 2.5 years, but also with Neptune kind of at the closing degrees of Pisces. We want to think even back to 2012, and we want to think even back to around not 500 years ago, but pretty much the entire cycle of Neptune where it was in Pisces before. So again, I will dedicate another video to this. But this is a big full moon, and we're not done with the Jupiter-Uranus yet. We're not done with Jupiter conjuncting Uranus. Now Jupiter delves on the 22nd degree. I want you to pay attention to the 22nd degree. Those of you who are seeking to solve like crime mysteries or murder mysteries or cold cases, it's very appropriate. This one can be a bit confusing for trying to do this, but you can pay attention to the 22nd degree. So Lilith is in 22nd degree Virgo, and Jupiter is in 22nd degree Taurus with Uranus, appropriate for solving murder cases that are to do with music industry, cold cases, drug cartels, the way that criminals or criminal organizations are associated with medical organizations. Very appropriate for astrologers to look at this, to look at asteroids as well. So this is for those of you who are listening to my Water Expands Upon Cooling series. And yes, on a mundane level, we will see revelations. Also, we will see revelations to do with the religious causes to the events that we saw in October in the Middle East. Simply because Jupiter is already on that degree. Okay, and then Uranus is going to go direct on that degree. So there's both revelations. Jupiter is more the philosophy, the idea, the religion. What were all these things involved? I also refer you to channels like Dan Waits, who talked about the heifer sacrifice, which I was like, oh my God, how crazy people can be. But also to the wormwood. There's a channel to do with wormwood and Deneb Algedi, where they look at Deneb Algedi as the sacrifice star. I give you appropriate approach to Deneb Algedi that doesn't require you to sacrifice people if you want to watch it on my channel. But it's also important to understand what is the point of view of the sacrifice star and how people worshipped it and how that they did stupid things affect us in a world war today. So Um, Jupiter can also be religious experiences around murder, religious murders, persecution of people because of the religion. Unfortunately, children, yes, as well. Jupiter is also semen, so I don't predict that to be the case. But because with all this medical warfare thing, it might be possible that certain men will be administered something that kills their semen. So, or certain women that have penis and still have like the operating system will be administered something that kills their semen. Okay, there are attempts to do medical welfare associated with fertility, population control, and whatnot. I addressed this in another episode. Um, so we want to be paying attention at this time. Now, on a personal level, how is this going to affect you? Um, Basically, you want to paying attention. What do you have in Scorpio in the beginning? Okay, first 10 degrees of Scorpio, 10 degrees of Taurus. What do you have there? And of course, on the entire axis, which would be on the first 10 degrees of Leo and Aquarius, respectively. Okay? With Aquarius, you're going through a Pluto transit, so it's going to take some 2 decades. Where then you want to be paying attention to what you have at the last degrees of Pisces and at the entire Aries is affected by this. So which houses these are for you? And the Jupiterianus, yes, so those who are ruled by Jupiter, which means Pisces, ascendant, sun, moon, or stellium, which means a couple of planets in Pisces, Sagittarius, they are going to be most affected because it's involved in 22nd degree. You know my protocol. Turn to Al-Qaeda not just as kind of like the whale protection or stuff that I've seen are beautiful, but I want you to turn really anti-assassination, okay, petition, anti-assassination. Al-Qaeda is in Virgo. So you want to be looking it up. Another person is doing talismans of Al-Qaeda is Christopher Warnock. It's nothing to do with Al-Qaeda, okay? Just the way ISIS has nothing to do with ISIS. Okay? So just to make sure, because, you know, I talk about various topics, so some of my viewers might not be astrologers, like, no, I'm not going to telling you to petition Al-Qaeda. So, just in check. And of course, our goal. Those are the planets that you want to contact around this. And really, anti-assassination, psychic and physical protection. If you do return to sender, then return to the one who gave the order. And do not involve family members, children, and stuff like that. Okay, it's not about don't give generational curses back to people. Okay, that's not what we do. It's like there was me doing return send to sender before 7th of October, and then like after 7th of October, I'm kind of like, okay, there's really weird stuff going on in the world. It's more than just kind of like, you know, return your energy back to you. It's kind of like people really send stuff, so it's kind of like, okay, return to the one who gave the order and do not involve the ones surrounding them. And of course, freeze whoever is obeying illegal order. So those type of petitions would be appropriate. If you're ruled by Jupiter, like I am, then please get to know, get acquainted with these, and you can do petitions, and you can work when the ascendant or midheaven is conjunct in Al-Qaeda or conjunct in Algol. Another tip that I took from Christopher Warnock and kind of made my own changes to it. So you can just tend to this for protection. And if you want to do something like charity, then a prevention of assassination would be appropriate, raising awareness to assassinations. And again, depending on what is it, if it's for religious persecution, the right to exit religious persecution, for women and for transgender women is appropriate. in here with alcohol, then the right to exit anything to do with sexual boundary violation, but also psychological, what we call psyops, psychological and psychic attacks. I just ran into an article that looks at psychosis and voice hearing in the US versus China. Whereas in the US, people hear violent threats and stuff that they really want to get rid of. In China, they usually hear also comforting voices, even from political leaders, and feel that these voice hearing experiences is kind of like channeling, is positive channeling, not only, but also positive channeling. So when I channel, it's closer, I guess, to the experience from China than from the US. Why is it so? I don't know, but this is another topic that might be addressed. And so the open dialogue can be appropriate even for alcohol, especially when those are people who have been having what people call psychosis because of sexual boundary violation and stuff like that. Just in general, validation, believing people, and allowing them to speak up and heal, supporting their voices and testimonies is appropriate. Anything more? Yes. Those who are ruled by Sun and Moon, okay, so Cancer and Leo, Sun, Moon, Ascendant, of course, you're always affected by the celestial events around the lunations. Of course, the full moon is going to be affecting you. The people who are ruled by Venus and Mars, so this would be Scorpio and Taurus, but also to some Libra and, of course, Aries. To you, it's personal, okay? But it's not personal in the Jupiterian. So you want to, those of you are, you want to be cautious around the Jupiterian on the 22nd degree. So there might be a Jupiterian figure here. Yes, that might be directing aggression towards you. For most of you, it's not going to be lethal unless there are other significations in the chart. And I have seen cases, okay, and the cases usually have so many significations that it's kind of like an if you know, you know. And also the person will have many significations, okay, like dreams or premonitions or stuff like that. So yes, please do not get overly alerted, but I do want you to listen to what I said to the Jupiter ascendants here, because this might be affecting you, and you also want to get to know Al-Qaeda and get to know Al-Ghul and petition and so on. Kind of like a just in case. Saturn ruled ascendant, that would be both Capricorn, but especially Aquarius, because Pluto is also involved in your sign. For you, it is, because Pluto is in a T-squared, Aquarians would be more affected. And for them, it's appropriate to also listen to what I said about Jupiter on the 22nd degree. Okay, so go back in the video and listen again and apply these tips, especially with Al-Qaeda and Al-Ghul. Other than that, you probably already know the drill and already know the drama. It's not going to be something overly new to you. The Pluto effect can be revealing more facets, or maybe facets around the science, of how things are done, the technology. You might discover certain little technologies that are affecting your life personally. You might develop them. Now with the last ascendants, we have the Mercury ruled ascendant. So Mercury is still retrograde, 16 degrees, conjuncting Rahu, but it will not perfect its conjunct to Rahu. It will go back and go direct. So for you, you are affected because Mercury is in Mars sign. in general, you are affected by Mercury retrograde. In general, the entire eclipse was with Mercury retrograde. It's the ruler of your ascendant. In general, Mercury conjuncting Rahu is a big mess. So now you have a full moon around this. It's just more mayhem and chaos. Again, listen to the 22nd degree. So just it's kind of like just in case. Messages, you can be a little bit of the messenger in this situation, okay? You can be the one who's going to deliver the message. And I'm going to talk about an example that I had. I've been ordering a talisman that came in something that was packed by a company in Netherlands, and I'm half Dutch, so many Netherlands stuff came up, like huge, big time. And so not only that, I try to address like a paperwork and all these things. So many things coming up. And I got, I was going to buy a drink, and I was kind of pointed to the mangoes. And I was sitting at the restaurant, and I was ordering a meringue, and it was something with the mangoes, Marango. I'm like, oh, the Marango case. Yes, the Marango case is finalized in court, but we're not done with the implications. And so you might be both recipient of such messages, and they come in a really funny way. Wait a second. Or you might be the giver or so of some messages like this. Okay, so you might get those type of weird words, messages, stuff coming together, bringing in, and there's going to be news about the case. There's going to be you're the news person, you're the messenger delivering the news. And things around, also things that you said, and communication are going to be, information is going to be, and again, the whole point of this lunar, I almost said eclipse, but it's kind of appropriate because we're still touching on the eclipse point, okay? We're still engulfing the 90th degree of Aries. So this lunation is kind of like touching on this eclipse again. And so you will see how the points are so interconnected. It was going to be exposed, this how this message is exposed, how everything is so interlinked. In almost a way that you can't separate one thing from another. You more than other people will be making the linkage, the connection, the messaging, the wording. A certain technology at this time can be a little bit of a shutdown, and this might expose, I've previously addressed that if ASML in Netherlands would strike for 22 days, they could literally pressure the world to abolish expandable children, Epstein rings, and whatnot, because this is a company that makes the nanochips to every single technology, okay? From weapon to cell phones to biomedical to anything that has a chip in it. Maybe Bill Gates too. I don't know. I don't know. But if this, like, if they just took a strike of 22 days, took a vacation, nobody works for 22 days, the world literally stops. Okay? And such a thing can happen. So with Mars, it can be a hacking, or you don't know if it is hacking, or if it is whistleblowing, or if it is a psyop, or if something like that. So those trade news, so stuff like trade falling, certain systems falling, kind of like it's a bit of a tower card when that happens, because of the nature of Mercury retrograde. It's just a tower card on technology. But again, I'm not the type of astrologer who tells you Oh my God, this is doom and gloom. What happens in the tower cards? Okay, what falls in the tower cards? Anything that no longer serves. It's a beautiful moment, even sometimes. Imagine if all the clinical files of all the people who treat you would be exposed. Okay, all the psychologists, psychiatrists, and the treat you. Okay, what they take, what they administer, some people are even influencers and say you must take your drug, and then you see that they're not taking anything. So it's Mercury retrograde is where if something goes broken, it will be fixed for the better, and if something goes missing, it will be fixed for the better, and then some new information can arrive. Okay, oh, I was looking for this thing, and what happened? Oh, the cat peed there, I have to clean it. Oh, there's my passport. Okay. This is Mercury retrograde, and it does that. So if a communication breaks down, or something can actually be renewed. Okay, some communication can be renewed. This is true to everybody, but it's also going to be highly involving the Mercury ascendants, which is Virgo and Gemini. I think I pretty much tended to the entire zodiac. So while it's not by houses or where it's going to be, I kind of need a reading for that. But I think you already begin to understand, because Mercury has been retrograde, so you know what happened, what's up. So it's just coming up again. And because Mercury is next to Rahu, I want you to think about these series of eclipses. I want you to think about 9 to 12 years ago. I want you to think about 18 years ago. Okay, so all of these things come into. I've seen videos about Y2K. I'm not joking. Coming up, Y2K as a fashion, okay, not as the Y2K like the millennium stuff. So trends coming back as well. What's more about this pink moon? Oh yes, the association, and this is as much as I got from everybody the Twitters about the deacons. Is the deacon in Scorpio? The moon is in the deacon in Scorpio. Correct me, Kopok, if I'm wrong, but the moon is in the deacon associated with hunger. I know that Vedic wise is associated with the desire for knowledge, kind of like a knowledge that is to know everything. But here I think, yes, of course, moon can be with Mars here, can be to know everything about the mystery and can have to do with murder. So again, opportune time for addressing cold cases, but also moon in here can unfortunately be hungry. Okay, it can be food is missing, certain food is missing. And this is something that's happening in the world, but we're going to be receiving more information about this, perhaps around food aid in the world and kind of like drug trafficking under the guise of food aid. I know we had this in Gaza where they were dropping, bombs instead of dropping food, or dropping expired, like children died of package of expired food that fell on their head. And so really horrid stuff that is, 2030 has no excuse. And all the masks that they put around is already falling, I believe. So this is true in the way this is affecting children worldwide. So it can be shortages of food, unfortunately. Also with Mars Neptunes can be it can be a little bit about this too. And war zones, but also medicines, so poisoning and stuff like that can unfortunately occur as well. Um, and and again, it's nothing new, but it's more like I think it's not necessarily that it's new type of food shortages, but more like new light is shed on the topic. Okay. Around the involvement of like medicine, food, and poisoning and welfare, medical welfare, and so on. So, anything good to say about this? Well, yes, you are going to be receiving information. You're going to be understanding the intricacy. This is a nation that tends to the intricacy of life. It's not a black and white solution. Um, I would definitely title this the human experience type of lunation, where sometimes you don't really have anything much to say, but to um, I don't know, if be present or to hold space or to just acknowledge what is going on. And a lot of people have been talking about, for example, if you talk about the day level, that the size of bombing in Gaza was like the size of bombing in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We're not talking about the nuclear radiation, we're talking about just kind of like how many bombs and the immediate letalities. No, because it wasn't 800 people, 80,000 people. About what we don't talk about is that many of what we call natural disasters, that these explosions that we see in oceans, and one of them might intercept with kind of like a network of communication, internet. And this is where nuclear experiments and other experiments have been done in the oceans or in the depth of the soil. And then you have an earthquake with 700 people dead, thousands of people dead. Nobody talks about this. It's just a natural disaster. Nobody takes accountability for this. And those are the hidden democides that we see around the world. And I'm speaking as a person who looked into natural disasters, both from like the scientific, methane radiation, gas emission, and the temperatures, and the astrology, and what can we predict and whatnot. And this is lovely, but we also need to talk about those type of explosions and explosives and the deaths under the guise of natural disaster. I think is appropriate to discuss. Will there be something like this? And I think more with the Jupiter-Uranus. The Jupiter-Uranus is April 28. Uranus enters the 22nd degree of Taurus. This is just a couple of days after this lunation, and it's a decreasing moon, so it's a completion of something. There can be as well such a thing that would be guised as an earthquake, a volcano eruption, and so on and so forth. I'm not going to get into the spiritual stuff of that because, some people look at volcanoes like it's an eruption of evil forces that come to destroy you. I think that enough with bashing the feminine. Sometimes the land is just mad for a reason. So, but what happens in essence that these explosives are as well war, and we've had one in Japan. We have them all the time, and not all of them are just earthquakes. Pluto is involved. Pluto is nuclear energy. And this can be nuclear, and Saturn, the ruler of Pluto, is in Pisces, so around the ocean, so nuclear energy exploding around the ocean is not news. It's about time that we started to address that instead of like mystically looking at the stars, which is a great idea, but it's not suffice. Okay, it's not enough when we want to address the phenomena. Okay, there's an ontological unit here that is not just a natural disaster. Um, it's good to look at the astrology, and yes, triangles are involved. Okay, yes, we have a square here. Yes, it's called a square T-square, but it's kind of like a triangle form in the sky between the sun and the moon and the Pluto. With rulers. Okay, rulership is also important if you are looking into the astrology of those phenomena. It's just important that we'll not address them just as natural disasters anymore, but more as explosives, and when do they have nuclear explosions, and we see it as earthquake or a volcano eruption or tsunami. There's no such thing as purely natural disasters in 2024. It's unscientific to say otherwise. So this is what I have to say. Yeah, and we're done with this video.